Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the final full day of the Nantucket Film Festival. Yes. We do screen films tomorrow. We have 4 films screening. We have Best of Fest films and Audience Award films, so please go onto our website and you'll see the films that we'll be screening tomorrow. I'm Estelle Brabe. I'm the executive director, and this is In Their Shoes, sponsored by Film Nation. Today, that's okay. So today we are here to talk about Noah Baumbach's body of work. For those of you who were at the tribute last night, you got to see a reel. For those of you who were not, you'll get to see it. You will get to see it here. He is joined by his 2 multi-film collaborators, Ben Stiller and Adam Driver, and Chris Matthews will be interviewing them. Without further ado, please give a warm welcome to Adam Driver, Ben Stiller, Noah Baumbach, and Chris Matthews.
Thank you. I think we're going to look at a bunch of clips that people got to see last night, but here's a chance to see them in the work of Noah Baumbach. I think we should watch just to get the cinema in our heads to start the conversation.
If you can, try and hit it at your mother's backhand. It's pretty weak.
Got it.
Ow! Okay, yeah. Mom and I are going... We're going to separate.
You're not going to be leaving either of us.
We're going to have joint custody. Frank, it's okay. I've got an elegant new house across the park.
Across the park? Is that even Brooklyn?
It's only 5 stops on the subway. It's an elegant block, the filet of the neighborhood.
I just spent my last 20 on groceries. You're poor. Yeah. Since graduation, I'm poor, you're rich. We are no longer equal.
Well, my parents are rich. You know what I wish? I wish we were just going off to war. Or retiring. I wish I was just retiring after a lifetime of hard labor.
I hope you're not interested in that girl. I find her insufferable.
What does that mean?
It means I can't suffer her. She's loud and stupid, and she goes on about things of which she knows nothing about.
She got into Harvard early.
Stupid people get into Harvard early all the time.
Youth is wasted on the young.
I'd go further. I'd go, life is wasted on people. The thing about you kids is you're all kind of insensitive. I'm glad I grew up when I did, because your parents were too perfect at parenting. All that Baby Mozart and Dan Zane songs. You're so sincere and interested in things. There's a confidence in you guys that's horrifying. You're all ADD and carpal tunnel. You wouldn't know agoraphobia if it bit you in the ass, and it makes you mean. You know, you say things to someone like me who's older and smarter with this life air. I'm freaked out by you kids. Hope I die before I end up meeting one of you in a job interview.
Is this your family?
Nope.
Yo, check it, vintage lenser.
Tell me the story of us.
Again? All right, Francis. We are going to take over the world.
You'll be this awesomely bitchy publishing mogul.
And you'll be this famous modern dancer, and I'll publish a really expensive book about you.
The D-bags we make fun of will put on their coffee tables.
And we'll co-own a vacation apartment in Paris.
And we'll have lovers.
And no children.
And we'll speak at college graduations.
And honorary degrees.
So many honorary degrees.
The way you treated me really messed me up for a long time.
Everyone is an asshole in high school.
You made a lot of people feel bad, not just me.
I feel sorry for the 13-year-old girl that was you, but I don't feel sorry for you now.
We were 17.
If I was 13, I'd apologize to you, but seeing as both of us are in our 20s, I don't feel the need.
I just turned 30.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You're a bitch.
I remember when this song was just considered bad. But it's working.
It's an avocado and almond milk sorbet. Benny designed the container.
Tastes like that candy that they sometimes make into pigs or little fruits.
Yeah. It's, shit, I know that.
I keep wanting to say baklava, but that's a Greek dessert.
The almond tasting pigs and fruits are made of...
I'll look it up.
No, that's too easy.
Let's try to remember it.
Can I now?
No. Let's just not know what it is.
I want you to know we're doing our very best. We want to see your father walking out of here soon.
Thank you, Dr. Sony.
Now, I'm going to be on vacation for 3 weeks starting tomorrow.
What?
Really?
Are you serious?
You'll be in very good care. Dr. Brotman will be taking over.
Do you have to go? Can't you just push it?
Here. God, no. My husband will divorce me. We're going to China.
You're putting our dad in a coma and then leaving us?
It's not like that, Matt. It's not, right, Dr. Sony? It's not like that?
Well, technically, yes, it's that.
How could you do this to him? Who could even dream up such a plan?
Me. It's what I do for a living.
And we get to the squid and the whale, and she described it for me. It was still scary, but it was less scary.
I'm 56 years old, and I gotta start using condoms.
Dad.
And it's crazy.
Dad, stop.
You like me so much more than you think you do.
No, I'm a Philistine. It's hard, I think, to find people in the world you love more than your family.
Sometimes it's good to do what you're supposed to do when you're supposed to do it.
Well, this is something else. This is something else. I want to start, God, these mics are pretty hot. I want to start with the movie you all collaborated in, the one that was the While We're Young. And it has so many themes in it about creativity. And I think all of us, how many people saw the Robin Williams doc this weekend? It's obviously terrorizing, given how his life ended, but the urge to be creative in your business and the fact that you all chose a creative life. You know, you didn't get down you took the road less traveled by, and the pressure that puts on your life to constantly be successful. You've got a lot of old bad guys in your movies, Noah, that to the very end are struggling to prove their creativity, whether it's Jeff Daniels in Squid or it's Dustin Hoffman, and they hang on to what they were able to do at one point in their life. Why did you choose a life that requires continual creative success?
So I could document how difficult the struggle is, I guess. I don't know. I guess, I was still sort of, when I was a kid and wanted to make movies, it seemed kind of impossible. I didn't know anybody who made them. I didn't, it just seemed like something that other people did. So it's something I very much wanted to do, but I also thought it doesn't happen to regular people. It's somehow some other thing. And then I started doing it, and I don't know, I guess I still feel connected to, that person on the other side of it, and so a lot of my movies, I think, tend to kind of are a conversation in some ways with, both my actual childhood, but also I think, people I knew, sort of people who, maybe were creative but didn't have an outlet for it, like Greenberg, the character Ben plays, and so it is kind of the theme of a lot of the movies. At the same time as I acknowledge it's a kind of crazy job to have, or
Well, it's a theme of a lot of your movies, and everybody here is here for a reason, because they really appreciate the creative lives you've led. And Ben, the character you played you've played 3 of his movies now, and 2 of them you're creative guys almost constricted by your desire to protect your uniqueness, to use the phrase, and 1 you're just sort of the money guy and you're happy. It's like in the Meyerowitz movie, you're just the guy that's making all the money. You're a financial advisor. You're on easy street. You're moving this thing, and you just seem happy for the first time.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's probably because he's kind of disconnected in a way from what's really going on. I mean, I think those characters that in the other movies, Josh and Greenberg are kind of guys who are definitely in more angst and dealing with it on the surface. And I think in Meyerowitz, he's happier because he's not going deeper. And then I think at a certain point he obviously does connect a little more.
Yeah.
But
you seem debonair, and you're smiling now, but
well, it was funny when Noah sent me the script, and we had talked about it with Adam Sandler. I didn't at first know which role I was supposed to play. And I remember we had a conversation. I was like, I wasn't sure if I was right for this role.
Right, and my response was, I think this is the most like you've actually ever played.
The money guy. That's all right.
Disconnected.
Let's Adam Driver, you played the character in While We're Young, but you played the young guy who's the hustler. And the older guy, who's in his 40s, you're playing somebody in their early 40s, is not willing to be a hustler. He wants to be unique. He wants to be fresh and clean. And he's stuck in a 10-hour documentary. He can't edit it. He's hopelessly out there trying to be original. And your guy's cruising along, connecting through him to his father-in-law to get your start when you're backing. Did you think of yourself as morally compromised in that character?
No, I tried to not think of it as morally compromised because it's a judgment. But I definitely was reading it, and I empathize as a person more with Ben's character than I did with mine. Well, not in the nice guy, just there's something I thought really interesting and really complex in someone who's almost crippled by their. It's definitely a job that's self-generated. No one's going to tell you to get up and do your job or to memorize your lines or be around for other people. You have to kind of set these parameters and goals for yourself, and there's no one really around to keep you on track. So sometimes I relate to that idea of getting so overwhelmed or invested in a process that it's so, or a process, or an acting or in anything that it's debilitating in a way. And what he's doing is, if there is such a thing, more authentic. And I always identify with those people in life or actors who have gone the extra step or are really trying to make it authentic, and then it's always crushing and crippling when you realize it doesn't really matter. It's not really about me feeling it, it's about an audience feeling it or about an audience getting the story. Then it just feels like wasted time. So then you meet, but then my character is someone who appropriates other people's hard work and kind of passes it off at his own. But in and of itself, there is a skill to that, to just being constantly creative, and regardless if it's not yours. And if just the idea of the morality in creating something is something that is an interesting question, and I don't think Noah answers, that I don't have an answer for. I definitely have a preference, and I think there should be a moral way of creating something, but again, it doesn't really matter because I don't know if it's so much about my feeling gratified with something that I've created or the story overall being told, and if someone responds to the crappier version that I think is less authentic, it's not really, who am I to say that they're right or wrong?
Yeah. And in Squid, which is a masterpiece. I think everybody seen Squid, Noel? Well, everybody should see it. And when you go to demand, I know it's a while to get from S to SQ, but it's worth it. If you can actually voice it in, I'm telling you, it is a masterpiece. In that movie, you've got a dysfunctional marriage. Not that there's anything wrong with divorce, because these people should have never been together, clearly. Laura Linney and Jeff Daniels. Daniels is a fraud. He's a guy that wrote a couple early novels that were pretty good. He's living off that with having sex with his students at school, and it's the character. Sort of the character he played in Terms of Endearment, only a more advanced study. And the kids are learning all the wrong values from the father. The kid, played by Jesse Eisenberg, steals a song that's sort of it's on the American list practically, and he steals it thinking he's going to get away with it, and the old man is teaching him that way, I think. But you didn't like him. He's not a likable character at that point.
The dad.
I always hated the cat's dad's terrible.
Well, yeah. But I always felt like he in a way, because it's like he's more of a success. This is true of Dustin's character Meyerowitz too. It's like the way they define success is part of the problem. It is the problem. You know, I mean, he teaches, he's married, he's got 2 kids, he lives in Park Slope in Brooklyn, and he's had some novels published. I mean, that's not a bad run. But he sees himself as a failure, and so he, you know, acts accordingly. And I think, you know, I mean, it's kind of what happens in While We're Young also, but I think it's sort of these kind of American ideas of success and what, you know, and you know, art and commerce and, you know, what you know, and he's from a generation that can't acknowledge that they want success. He can't anyway. I think he feels like it's a sellout, so he has to pretend that he's the better way of doing it, even though he feels so.
Yeah, he's
kind of
my generation.
compromised.
He's a 60s guy.
Yeah.
But the one line is, you say he doesn't think of himself as special, but at one line in there, which is a killer line, he refers to Franz Kafka as one of my predecessors.
Right. And then his son refers to Franz Kafka as Kafkaesque. Yeah.
When you write a line like that, great line with a young kid, he told me it was Kevin Kline's kid.
Kevin Kline's kid, yeah. It was Owen, yeah.
And he says to Dad, who's very pompous, he said, whatever the difference is between pompous and supercilious, he's somewhere in there. But he said, what's a Philistine? And what's the answer?
Someone who's not interested in interesting movies or books or interesting movies. I think your mother's brother Ned is a Philistine. Yeah, that was that.
And the kid says, I'm a Philistine.
Yeah, he's like, yeah, I'm a Philistine.
Our family has been living off that line for about 20 years. I mean, what's a Philistine?
Yeah.
But the competition, your character, back to you, because I think it's not just a choosing a life of, like Robert Frost, the road less traveled by, and becoming a creative artist, but it's the degrees of it. How far are you willing to go to, you know, Robert Altman, I once heard him say, Pretty Woman was ridiculous, but it was an enormously popular movie about a very attractive streetwalker, basically. And he said that's an absurd idea for a movie, and a ridiculous idea that could be a human experience. And yet, that was a successful movie. And Altman's probably probably added up to that one. And the character, I wonder if in Hollywood, if it is the question of going with the commercial, going with what somebody else did, as opposed to doing something, it has to be you. Ben?
I mean, I honestly think in relation to Noah, you know, that's what I've always felt with Noah's work, is that he made a choice early on. And maybe you could talk a little bit about how you started out, because you started out kind of working. You had one of the first things you did, a television show, or a pilot, or.
I was in the middle, but yeah.
But kind of like working within more of the mainstream system, and then I think Noah made a choice at a certain point, pretty early on, that you wanted to make the films that you wanted to make and not care about it. And as, you know, for me, as someone who's worked in mainstream movies a lot, you know, you really do. Have to accept certain things when you want to work on that scale, which is, I mean, you know, it's true. The masses have never been the arbiters of great taste or anything, but it's, you know, but there sometimes are good things that hit and everybody likes, but more often than not, you have to have a singular voice and be willing to work on a scale, both budgetarily and in terms of the audience that you're going to get, that you don't care about that because you're going to say what you want to say, and those are always the greatest films, I think.
Yeah, but some of your movies that are my favorites, like Meet the Parents, which I think is just a work of wonder, you know. But you and De Niro's relationship with the lie detector test and that whole thing with the house coming apart, every single thing that could go wrong with the life is going wrong.
Yeah, I mean, but that's like one of those, you know, kind of like premises that's somehow related to a lot of people.
Yeah.
But, you know, any movie like that, and it has to go through this process being made where it is, you know, the director and the writer are thinking about what an audience is going to, how they're going to accept it. Are they going to laugh? Are they going to, you know, like a good one of those, like I'd say Meet the Parents is a good one of those, is somehow it maintains its integrity through that process. But there's a testing process where an audience watches it, the studio insists on, and they send back cards and they rate it and they score it. They say which characters they like, what scenes they liked, they didn't like. You know, a process that Noah's movies never go through, and most independent movies never go through. And that can, you know, dilute an original idea sometimes.
Did you ever have an ending change because of the audience reaction?
I I'm trying to think. I mean, I don't think I've ever changed in a movie that I've
Hitchcock used to
directed,
do
but-
that. His suspicion that Cary Grant, or I think it was, ends up being a good guy. He wasn't trying to kill his wife, but he was clearly trying to kill his wife.
No, it makes for a very peculiar movie because
Let's talk about anger in your movies, because I love your urban anger metaphor, which is parking. And anybody's ever lived in New York or Washington, maybe Boston too, there are no parking places. It's like musical chairs. For every house, there's like a half a parking space. So nobody's ever going to be happy, and the police are going to be happy because they're going to fill their books. But you have a guy in your first, in Squid, the other movie after the others, you did the first of really personal movies. You have Jeff Daniels, whose life is, he has no money in his pocket. He has like $5 in his pocket. He's teaching, and he has nothing left from his splitting the cost with his family, his wife. And he's trying to find a parking place where there aren't any parking places in Park Slope, and he's going crazy. And then you escalate that to Adam Sandler in Meyerowitz, where he's being cursed and had the horns blown at. You can't park, you're not allowed to park in there without somebody behind you blaring the horn, ruining your day just because you're trying to get into a parking space. How's that a reflection of personal anger and urban living? If you're middle class, I mean, if you're rich, you got a parking space, you know.
Well, I mean, in Meyerowitz, his daughter says to him at one point, like, you know, no one can hear you, only I can hear you. I mean, it's like this fight
car.
you're having with, you know, these imaginary people, you know, the people that you think are, you know, whoever's on the horn behind you, or, you know, so it's like a, I don't know, it's a fun way to write a character, because in a way it's a kind of like, it's a monologue of frustration, you know, that they're just kind of, you know, and it also, there's this sort of like looping around constantly, so you know, they're not fun to shoot because you're jammed in the back of the car usually. Because I like to, also with those, both of those, I wanted to kind of put you inside the car rather than, you know, do a process, what, you know, often you do in driving is they do process trailers where you're shooting like through the windshield and you have this sort of distance from the people driving, you know, where they used to, you know, do rear screen projection or something. But they're not fun to shoot because you end up kind of jammed in the back with the DP, and you know, and you're shooting the people. But you know, we end up driving around the city and, you know, kind of living it for real. So, and actually, Adam in that one clipped there was a camera on the side of the car. We had one in the back and one on the side of the car, and he actually clipped it off a truck on the way. It was the first day of shooting also, and it was like, and the cop who was with us sort of looked at it, was like, just keep going, just keep going.
You know, the thing about your movies is you get the feeling, starting with Squid, I've been binging on Baumbach. I've seen them all, but I missed a couple when they came out, but I've seen them all. And there's a real thematic there. And one of them is, the backstory is so big and looming in your movies. It's like Hemingway. There's so much more going on with Jake Barnes than you're seeing, and Sun on the Horizon. And in yours, it's like fourth divorce with Dustin Hoffman's character. Fourth, but he always says, but one annulment. Right. And the same Jeff Daniels said 3 divorces, but 1 annulment. It's like they're trying to excuse that by that marriage should have ended. It should have never started, that one. But tell me about how you build the story and then bring these characters in, like, you know, like bring Adam in. These guys are coming, and the kids in your book, in your movies, are coming in late to a story in a marriage that's fallen apart long before they were of the age of consciousness even.
Right. Well, I mean, they're all different in a way. I mean, they all sort of have different motors of why they're interesting to me and why I want to kind of, I'm driven to do it or tell the story. I think, you know, with Squid, it was initially was to tell divorce from the perspective of the kids, you know, and because it's something, you know, from people who don't really understand, you know, like you said, they've come late to the story. So, you know, just as they're kind of making sense of it, it's over, it's ending. Yeah. And, you know, and so that was sort of what, you know, and the sort of influence of the father and the parents, you know, if the parents going through a hard time and unable to parent properly, which is the case of that movie, and also, you know, it was also that time, the 80s, it was, you know, it was like joint custody was this new thing, and it was, you know, I always felt like everybody, you know, the French director Jean Renoir has this quote about his characters, he was like, everyone has their reasons, and I feel like that's what try to do with these movies is, you know, While We're Young is another one where, like, you know, that they do have their, I mean, Ben's character's sense of nobility in While We're Young is total folly, really, even though it's also, you know, it's...
But I think they're going to make it. I think you and Naomi
I think the marriage will make it, but I don't know that
of all your movies, I've been sorting through in my head, where is a marriage that looks like it's really a good one? And even though they do the F you to each other, they really mean it. I mean it, F you. Like, I mean it this time. I get the sense there's a strength there.
Yeah, I mean, I feel that probably. I mean, I think I always felt, you know, it's funny, like when Adam was talking about his character in While We're Young, I started to like feel the same thing I felt in the movie, which was like sort of this heartbreak that I think, you know, these are people who are just, with all these machinations and things going on and marriages and everything and guys using each other, all this, like at the heart of it is just there are people who want to connect with each other, and I think that's what, you know, these movies are really about. Like that's what I feel like Noah really reflects really well in his work. And I feel like, you know, Josh just really wanted to, really felt heartbroken because he really felt like he had a new friend. And I think, you know, in terms of divorce and things like that and marriages and all this stuff, I feel like that Noah's stuff is about getting to, through these little specifics of what goes on in relationships, different types of relationships. He's really getting at the heart of just like human interaction, you know, which is, I think, a very simple kind of thing, which is people just want to, you know, connect and be loved.
How do you learn how to do, you know, collaboration? I watched you last night with Mike, and I watched you with Tom and Ben the other night, and you guys were unbelievable. Did everybody see the show at the casinos Friday night? And I don't mentally believe that was done for the first time. That whole improvisation. It doesn't seem to be how a whole evolution of a whole great story, you know, 3 times like bullfights, 3 of them in about 45 minutes, were all real and storytelling that you guys were doing on your feet.
Yeah, well, they do that all the time. I'd never done it before.
But originally all the time.
No, they really do it. Every time they start from scratch. And one of the things that came out of it, and Noah mentioned this last night in his speech, was you know, this in the momentness of when you're improvising, you have to be listening and totally present. And I think that's the core of acting, really, is like you just have to be there in the moment with it. That's what that improvisation stuff is about. I mean, that's what...
You bringing back Ben 3 times, bringing back Adam a couple times. Why?
I'm good.
I'm just keeping count. Noah,
but can I just say something about like acting with Adam, just since we're here?
No, okay. No, we're here. I was going to say something about Noah and how the improv actually. Well, I mean, but you can sit there.
I was going to tell an anecdote about somebody else.
Can I tell a story about you, Chris? No.
You did it last night.
I know I did. Well, do you want to say what you were going to say?
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say that it's really interesting acting with Adam because Adam. So when we're doing the Noah movies, we talked about this before. Noah is, you know, you don't change the words. And a lot of movies, people change the words all the time. And he's very specific about the words. And it does put you in a place as an actor where you then have to figure out how to get to what you're saying because you can't shift it around to make it easier for yourself. And I find when I've worked with you, it's really interesting because practically every time there was a take, it was very different, almost every time. And it didn't feel to me like it was coming from anywhere other than you were just every time you came at it, you were starting fresh with it.
Yeah, well, it's different parameters. You were talking about improv last night, how you get asked all the time, like, what are the lines of improv? It's just like a different, it's very theatrical, Noah's writing, I would say. Which makes the sense to me. It's like, this is the script, this is what we're saying. I've thought a lot about it longer than you. I have a sense of what it is, and if you could just stick to this, anywhere within there, you can interpret the meaning of it completely different. You can put emphasis on anything if you want. That's not, but these are the words. So if you can play within this, then that's your great. And then there's other things you do where this script really is a guideline. Make it up. You know, so long as the sense overall, and there's not more like one's valuable, less valuable. I like both. I prefer knowing where the boundaries are. Really, it's like, okay, this is the. If you're working with great people and they're listening as much as you are, you can kind of do that. If you're actually listening to each other, if someone else isn't doing it, then you're just throwing things at them and they're shooting it down. But the meaning can always be different. And I learned that from theater. I always feel that if you do a 4-month run of a play, always at the end of the play, I want to go back to the very beginning and like, oh, now I have a better sense of it. Now if I could do, like I was doing this thing but totally wrong from the very beginning. And I know that's what I like actually about a lot of takes with Noah, because you have a lot of time to do it and feel like you walk away satisfied, because I know that you can do it 7 times a week and never quite get it right.
Yeah, well, there's another great quote about the story that I heard about acting was the director Ulu Grossbard, who we actually were talking about backstage, he was actually Elia Kazan's, I think, stage manager on when they did Death of a Salesman on Broadway with Lee J. Cobb, and he told me a story where they did a record of it, like a record album of it, like a year after the run, and Kazan couldn't be there, so he sent Ulu to be there with the cast to do the record, and he said it was one of the most exciting experiences being around actors he'd ever been in, because this was a play they'd done night after night over and over again and knew it so well, and then they all hadn't done it in a year, and so they were starting to do it, and at first they're all kind of looking at the script to remind themselves, and he said, and then it was just on the tip of their tongue. They all was coming back to them because the rhythm's a thing, and then he said as they got going, he said it was like the most alive he'd ever seen actors be, and I think, it was actually, I told that story to Mike Nichols, who gave me the quote that I said yesterday about when you're improvising, you're just so excited to think of it in the moment, you don't worry about backstory, you're just saying it. And I think that's kind of what I'm trying to do with actors, and when I do a lot of takes a lot of the time, because there is that thing where after a while, you do forget what you're even saying, and sometimes something amazing happens when that happens, because they're just saying it's just kind of some weird sort of internal mixture of both what they started with and exhaustion and where they are, and you get some other kind of thing, and it's kind of amazing. And when it I like to do long takes too for that very reason, because you get them playing it in real time, and they're actually, then they are really reacting off each other. And also Ben and Adam, are so alive as actors that you do it different too. You're always sort of reacting to what's particular to that take or that moment.
Yeah, I remember in Meyerowitz, Adam and I had a scene that was like a 3.5-page scene where we're walking down a hallway, and we get in an elevator, and then we walk out of the elevator, and we walk down another hallway, and we did 50 takes? Yeah. 50 takes of a 3.5-page scene. It was a long scene.
Yeah, Adam Sandler.
Sorry, Adam Sandler, yeah.
And 49 is in the movie. Take 49.
Take 49 is in? Okay.
That worked.
It's crazy because we got to
some
take
audio from 50.
Because we got to take 14. I remember we got to like 14. I was like, all right, I think we got it. You know what I mean? I looked at Adam, like, yeah, I think we're getting it. I feel like we're in it now. And then Noah was like, all right, let's go again. And we went to 50, like to 50. And there's something about that where you cannot, when it's that long a scene, as much as you want to kind of in your head have some idea, not that you want to, because you really do want to be in the moment, but you can't help it sometimes. You go, all right, this time I'm going to come at it, I'm going to be, I'm going to be happier in the beginning, or I'm going to, you know what I mean, or I'm going to be more positive, but there's no way that you can forecast where you're going to be 3.5 pages down the pipe. It's just going to flow and become its own thing. And then when you're doing it for the 50th time, it's really its own thing. And that's a unique experience that you don't get to do mostly in movies. And it does mirror the being in a play, where you do it every night, and every night is like another take almost. And you are constantly trying to find it. And I really have had that same experience where I got to the end of the run with a play and thought, okay, now I wish we were opening now, because now I finally figured it out. And so it's sort of like a mini theatrical run that you have doing a scene with Noah.
I met Kathleen, and my wife and I met Jeremy Irons one time, and he told us that after he had finished all the production of Brideshead Revisited, he'd done all the narration, that amazing voice of his, and that whole narration, he realized, I don't have it yet. I now know what I wanted to do. And he asked the people doing it if he could do the whole thing over again, because he found out that it was all about regret. And that's what he went, and if you listen to the tone of that magical narration, he did it all over again. He had it wrong the whole time, and he said, I finally figured it out. It's regret. How his friend, dissipated and died.
That's like a repetition is something that's like a common thing that we usually repetition is a huge thing in my life. I always listen to the same song again and again and again. And that, like whenever we go out for a long time, we would always go to the same restaurant. I'd have the same thing then we just started to switch it up, but now we're just switching it up to the new place that we go all the time, to that new place. But there is something about that. We do the same things all the time in life, and always there's such humor in how we still try to make them more efficient. I don't think I've ever still got into a car the right way. That's a bad example, but I could get into a car fine.
Well, speaking of getting into
I'm diving. I don't know why.
Speaking of getting into a new car. I do think that having watched all your movies, in a sort of a binge, that Frances Ha and Mistress America and with Greenberg as well, that the arrival on the scene in your life of Greta Gerwig was a splash of new, and that I can't imagine. Anybody seen Frances Ha? I can't imagine it without Greta. So tell me how that works.
That one worked. I'd cast her as an actor in Greenberg, and we had, she was amazing in that movie, and we became friends. I just had an idea. I think it was. I said this yesterday too. Collaborating with Greta, it's like we created, and I think it's the best collaborations have that, and I think it happens with actors in different ways, but because we collaborated as writers, and then also she was the actor, and it was something that neither of us individually ever would have come up with. It's this other, third thing, and I think also I had an idea, I think for me coming into that movie, I wanted to do something black and white. I wanted to do something that maybe had a kind of, I was thinking sort of like French New Wave movies, like Truffaut movies, that had this kind of lightness and sweep and scope and sort of a romanticism that kind of played at odds with a kind of, in a way, a kind of ordinary life, and ordinary struggles. It was sort of to elevate the ordinary. And Greta brought so much of kind of her, being that age at that time, and her, things that were happening kind of in that moment, and very personal stuff. And I think then it became a whole mind meld. But it was also a way I wanted to make a movie in a different way. Movies are very inefficiently constructed. Even smaller movies are. It's not unlike politics. It's a system that's. That you're just doing a version of the same thing that's been done for years, and it doesn't make any sense. Economic sense. So I'm always trying to come up with ways. Adam was really eloquent about this last night, but of ways to sort of try to find new ways to do it. And so Frances, we did it with almost in secret, and I think that brought also a kind of new, a kind of different kind of energy. But then, Greta and I...
That makes a big difference to the actors, too, because actors, you're so used to working within this system, which is, you show up, there's like a union crew, and they call you at a certain time, then you go to makeup, and then they do a rehearsal, and then, it's a very structured thing. And when you get to put into a different situation, Noah, shifted things for me on Greenberg. I remember 2 weeks into the shoot, I was looking for a place to sit down, and I realized there were no director's chairs on the set. I was like, oh, wow, there's no director's chairs. He doesn't have director's chairs on his set. Every set has director's chairs on it for the producers, the actors, the name of the character, the director. And it's a stupid, kind of old school thing that makes everybody kind of just sit around and, wait for everybody else to do stuff. And, that was the first time I realized, oh wow, he's really shifting things around here, in these little subtle ways, and much less subtle ways too, just in terms of, we'd go out and shoot a scene on the street, me walking on the street in Fairfax Boulevard without, telling anybody, and the camera in a van, in the back of a van.
You can only do that in LA with Ben Stiller because nobody walks, so that no one's looking.
Except we were on La Brea once, and I was walking in front of there are a lot of Hasidic synagogues there, and I was walking as Greenberg, like carrying some groceries, and these guys recognized me out of the synagogue, and they pulled me in.
There's just sort of just film rolling on just emptiness as Ben disappears into the synagogue and then comes out like thank you.
I got bar mitzvahed again.
By the way, doesn't everybody love Michael Cohen on Saturday Night Live? This guy, I think he's captured the fixer lawyer of Trump. It's amazing when he walks on in that kind of spooky way. And you're right, but as you say, sad, he's just like, is this guy going to flip tonight or next week? When's he going to flip? Anyway, that's what I worry about, or think hopefully about. I think with Greta, which you mentioned last night, you made your relation with her, what I think about her is charisma. We don't think of charisma with women as much as we should. I mean, men have charisma, Kennedy, of course, and Roosevelt, and for some Reagan. But I think she has charisma in Mistress America. I think it's about the pull of one person. I think my wife's got it too. This pull of other people come to you, and people just want to be around you. You've got this aura of happy, I'm going to make it. You know, no matter, even the things turned against her in Frances Ha. She ended up with by the way, everybody should know, Frances Ha refers to your name on an apartment house up front in the mailbox. And you don't know how it days her name, and only H.A. gets in there. And that's because she's looking for another apartment in New York. Her life isn't taking a turn for the better. It's just more of New York.
It's like one of the great endings of a movie.
I was going to say.
When you finally realize what it's about, it's Rosebud, you know, it's trying to get it, you know.
Well, working with Greta as an actor, it makes...
Where's Greta? There's Greta, who would you... Greta Gerwig. And the only reason she's not up here is she doesn't want to be up here. So.
Greta got too much attention already this fall. She needs to take a break.
No, I think there was a real star find there.
Well, she also, when you're, I mean, even just thinking of her as an actor, makes you want to like do movies that sort of are, for me anyway, that kind of feel connected to an older style of movie making because of, you know, when they all like had to, you know, when they all could dance, sing, you know, like when everyone had like every talent, you know, in like 30s and 40s screwball comedies, and they're all like, you know, and it's so physical and it's funny, but they could also do the drama. The same actors doing all the comedies and doing the dramas, and you know, people like Carol Lombard or you know, Barbara Stanwyck, or you know, and that for me it was sort of the excitement of working with her. Yeah, working with her. So. You know, John Wayne, who Greta's a big fan of.
What else does John Wayne do besides John Wayne? I didn't know that.
Well, he does a great John Wayne. You know,
Let me ask you about the beginning, because we're going to take questions very soon. Somebody's curating them, which is the new word, our questions from the audience. Collaboration again. I want to go back to the beginning of you collaborated with Wes Anderson on The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou, which was really great. And what was that like? I mean, because I love that movie because one of my kids, I swear, said Living with Us was sort of like that. It was just crazy, you know. And Jeff Goldberg is like, it's just like Christopher Walken. One of these guys just shows up and you laugh. You know, it's already done. You know, as the bad guy.
Yeah, well, that was we did two together. We did that one, and we did Fantastic Mr. Fox. He directed both of them, and you know, it was you know, Wes was. Like I feel like Wes came out fully formed as a writer director, and you know we both of us have our first movies, Kicking and Screaming and Bottle Rocket, were like the same year, and we met each other soon after that and became friends. And you know, I felt like in a way it took me a while to like find who I was as a director. Like Squid was kind of where I like, and that wasn't for another like almost 10 years after I made Kicking and Screaming, and you know, and working with Wes in the interim was really, it was very influential because I felt like just the way he worked, his certainty, the way he, like we would be right together, and I would sort of say things that I thought, well, this is a really funny line I just came up with, and he wouldn't, he somehow wasn't interested in it, and then I realized like just because he had to understand it to be able to use it. So but he was so precise about everything and the way he did it, and it really was an extension of our friendship, which is kind of what I feel like when we all work together now, it has become. But by the time and also I was in a kind of weird time in my career then too. I'd kind of made a couple movies, but hadn't, really, like I said, figured out I think who I was as a filmmaker yet. And so it kind of was, in a way, a lifesaver too, because it was a way to like learn and also contribute to, I think, two kind of amazing movies. And then when I came back, sort of things came, and I was able to get Squid made, in a way I felt sort of more ready than I had probably than if I'd gotten it made a few years before.
Adam, we saw you, I think you were up here with Patterson. Is it Patterson here at the festival?
Oh, I know I didn't come here, but I didn't know it was here.
It was here.
Oh, good.
Patterson, New Jersey. I really sort of discovered you in that whole movie. You're in the whole, when we saw the scenes, and it was such these kind of movies are great because they're not big studio movies. They're something else. I mean, to talk about a town of Patterson, New Jersey, that probably was overlooked a few times in history. The home of Lou Costello. I mean, this kind of stuff.
Right, yeah. Overlooked on a broader sense, but there's randomly a lot of people in history that are from Patterson, Alexander, Hamilton, a bunch of other people that are in the movie that I don't remember now. Lou Costello, as you were talking about.
Abbott and Costello?
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that something?
Yeah.
They made a movie.
But Jim Jarmusch is like, I think, one of the great filmmakers alive.
That's the first movie you saw Adam in?
No, I saw ones with you.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
He's also in Star Wars, too.
I know. Is that one of those big studio commercial movies that those Philistines go to see? Noah, your conversation feels so natural on screen. Do you draw their rhythms from dialogue you overhear or a part of your own experiences? I guess that's the same question.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, sometimes I'll have a line of dialogue that I've heard somebody say that I wrote down, and I'll try to incorporate it. But I mean, really, it's like conversations I have in my head, and I just kind of, you just sort of talk to yourself for a while and type, and then you go back over it and revise and change it and. But I think it's the part of writing, at least initially, that came the easiest for me, I think, or the most intuitively was.
Hurt people hurt people. Is that your line?
That's something I heard somebody say, actually. But I always thought it was funny, the idea of somebody quoting a line back to the person who told them the line in the first place, which is what Ben ends up doing in the movie to Greta's character, because she says, hurt people, and then he says, somebody once told me, hurt people. Oh, it was you. So, yeah. Which I guess is also what you were talking about, repetition. I think that I do have a lot of repetition in dialogue, too. It was something I'd always wanted to do in a movie, which I did in Meyerowitz, was have people tell the same story and anecdote twice, where, I mean, Dustin's character in that movie keeps telling, he meets Sigourney Weaver, and he keeps telling the story, and just that sort of thing of like language, there's communication, and then there's talking, and I think it's, you kind of, when are people actually hearing and, talking to each other, and when are they just talking?
Recount that, the conversation between Dustin Hoffman's character and the real Sigourney Weaver.
Right.
I said, how did he describe that important conversation?
Well, in real life, or in the movie, when he meets her, he's actually kind of even semi-rude to her. I mean, he's just, because he's shy, I think, but he just sort of, he barely mumbles his name. She says, hi, I'm Sigourney. He says, I'm Harold. And because he meets her at a gallery opening and at MoMA. and then, but then as a story, he keeps telling it. I mean, it's the same story. He says, and she said, "Hi, I'm Sigourney," and I said, "Hi, I'm Harold." But it doesn't get better.
Okay, this is for Adam. Who was the most influential person in your life, and why? From somebody named Reagan.
Who's the most in now?
Yeah, in life, in your life, and why? It's pretty heavy.
Yeah, I don't know.
You want to pass on this one?
Yeah, I'll pass on that one.
Who's the least influential? No, just kidding. Okay. This is for the actors, both of you guys, for the actors. You've done both large-scale and smaller budget films. What are the contrasting challenges and pleasures of each?
I have an answer for the other question. I actually just forgot what your question was, because I was thinking about the other question.
You want to go back? The most influential person in your life?
Well, I would say my wife, because she's here, but not just because she's here. Because I was also thinking of you kept mentioning like characters of like also earlier that I've been thinking about when you were talking about this person's not likable or that this person's a tough, challenging character. And one thing that we were talking about last night that my wife said I thought it was actually a really good point of like, you know, Jeff Daniels' character or Margot and Margot at the wedding, or you know Ben, you know, first time being happy because he's has money in a movie. Or I think that a lot of the characters in those movies are centered around family and in private, and often we're very ugly with each other in private, whereas in public it's more of a performance. And because there's so many of these private moments, people are just, you know, as they are, which is complicated. That was my answer to that. Or not, that wasn't even a question, I just was thinking about you saying that. What is the value? Yeah, then to your final question, and I'll finish this monologue, is
the big pictures and the indies.
There's value in both, I'd say. Financially, big things are great, but I've also been lucky in working with it. In Star Wars is a huge thing, but because of the people that are directing them, even though the scale of it is bigger and not the economics of it, but the time you have to figure out how to work in a different way because the turnaround is so long. Are you bored by my answer?
No, I'm just thinking.
About another question? That's what I was doing during your answers. So it's good.
I was just thinking, my mind drifted to Jeff Goldblum and why he always makes these zillion-dollar movies. And what comes first, Jeff Goldblum or the movie being a zillion-dollar movie? And every movie he's in, it seems to be unbelievably money.
So Star Wars, So you
asked me what I was thinking.
Yeah, right. No, I could tell you were glazed over. This is going to be good, though. It's good to have those experiences where I've been lucky in working on the big ones where it doesn't really feel like a big movie. It still feels like a small, independent, movie where it's like a very intimate conversation.
Ben, you make them both.
Yeah, I mean,
on purpose.
Yeah, I mean, lately not any big ones for a while, and I kind of feel like right now I'm more interested in doing. If there was a big one that I connected with, I would do it. But like working with Noah, it's a very specific experience, and it's really, I really enjoy that kind of experience. But working in a big movie, it can be really fun too because you get to work on a scale that just exists in those movies. It just depends on the people making the movie, the situation, what it is. I've enjoyed both, for sure. And I think it depends on where you're at personally in your life at the moment.
Did you notice when you were doing Night at the Museum, that franchise, that there was a squid and a whale in that museum?
I did, yeah. Yeah. Well, I grew up going to the Museum of Natural History, so I knew when I saw that squid and the whale, I connected with it on that level. And that one, that's a good example of Night at the Museum. Was a movie I loved making, the first one especially, because nobody knew that it was going to be successful or not. It was kind of a different kind of idea, but it was a chance to do something on a different kind of scale, and it was a little bit like we were figuring it out as we went along. So it had that feeling. It wasn't like a franchise yet,
What was it like working with Robin Williams?
Oh, God.
It's all in our minds here, but that amazing doc.
Yeah, I didn't see the documentary, but...
it's well done, I think.
Yeah. He was an amazing human being. He was an incredibly generous person. he was the way I think people related to him on screen, or what you saw of him on television or in an interview, or just that was really who he was. So I think people could get a feeling what he was like by seeing him, what you felt from him. I never. There was never a day that I was working with him where I wasn't inside going like, I'm loving this so much, because I had been a fan of his since Mork and Mindy, and he was to actually be acting in something with him every day I went to work with him. I would pretend like I was cool and he was nice, and he'd like, hey boss, how you doing? Because he called everybody boss. He was so generous. I never saw one person come up to him who he didn't give his entire presence to. A fan.
We were backstage doing something. I was pushing a book, and he was backstage. There was no one. It was Rita Wilson was there, and somebody else important in it. And he just decides to put on a show. And it was right before the invasion of Iraq. And he decides, just for this little 3-person audience, he's going to play. This is Robin Williams. He's going to play Saddam Hussein before we arrive. And he says, "We got to hide the sheet. We got to hide the sheet." He's talking about the nuclear weapons. Of course, there weren't any, but that's all right. This is the hard part. This is the last part. And this is the hard part. And one of the reasons a lot of the young people are here, I think, and parents of young people. And I'll start right across the room here in order. What's your advice to young screenwriters, directors, filmmakers? It's the last question. Killer. Your way.
Me? I would say, I had a chance to meet Costa Gavras, the filmmaker, when I was about 10 years old. And I knew I wanted to be a director when I was 10. And it was some screening my mother took me to. And I told him that I wanted to be a director. And he said, "I wish you courage." And he had a lot of courage in his films. And I think I'm just starting to understand what that is, because you really do have to have the courage to do what you want to do and not care about what anybody else thinks. And
His movies are about courage, too. About Z. Yeah. Z was a great movie. Noah? Advice?
Yeah, I think, also I think that now you can kind of do it now in a way that you couldn't, when I started, I there was sort of pre-digital filmmaking, and, I think you really can go make a movie now, like the sort of idea, in the old days of you'd make a short and hope to get the money for the feature, and depending on what the idea is, but if you have an idea that isn't, a giant blockbuster, you can kind of go just make it, and I think that's the thing to do, in a way, like when I think back, like if I'd had come up with digital, I would have liked to have made, 5 bad ones before I had a chance to make a first one, you think of even it used to be even in American movies in the 30s, when coming in the silence and even in the early talkies, they would make so many movies before the one you even heard of, and they got to kind of make mistakes and do it, and I think that's available to people now, in a way that they can go and just, make them, and you don't have to worry about failing or if it's good, people will hopefully see it. If it's not, make another one, Yeah,
I think I can't answer this question really well because for lots of reasons. But the thing that was helpful for me was going to school, because I had no understanding of acting. I had no kind of technique at all. That I can see now later in working with a wide group of people, the people who had just like a foundation of things to hold on to, whatever. That doesn't necessarily have to be from a big school or small school, but there's longevity in it, and also kind of to Noah's point that you don't really have that time as an actor, I don't think, to put aside, however long the program is, 3 or 4 years, to just focus as kind of tedious as it can be on yourself and your craft and where your body is and dialogue, how you move on a stage, how you move in life. You don't really get that time to do it. So for me, it was really helpful to have 4 years of just focusing on that thing before, and to Noah's point of having a chance to make mistakes for a long time, because there is, I think, so much pressure where if you do something good, then okay, then what's the next good thing? And there's not a lot of, I think, room or space for people to like, well, it's not, I mean, they're all, you know, it's a process. It's good now, but it's you have to have that room to fail, and it's hard to do that when you're under a microscope.
Well, thank you guys for doing what you're doing, because if there weren't people like you that took this risk of your life to be creative, it's a great thing. And that's why we're all here. And by the way, it's called a quarter board. That thing you won.
The award, yeah.
It's a quarter board. And congratulations. It's a great honor for us to give it to you.
Thank you. Yeah. Thanks a lot, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.